these days on unmanned aerial vehicles, and specifically the trajectory planning, how to plan the path of an aerial robot, as there is no pilot sitting on these vehicles. So it is of course upon the due upon the onboard computer that to generate the path and also issue commands so that the vehicle can track that. So that is the broad sort of theme of this discussion that I'm going to have with all of you. So trajectory planning and tracking for aerial robots. Now, all of you know about quote unquote drone revolution. So drones have emerged as a disruptive technology, and it has now the application set has spanned from strategic to non-strategic to civilian to military to academic to all sports, all kinds of applications that drones are envisioned to be used for. And it is estimated that by 2025, the entire UAV market is expected to be close to $45.8 billion. And with this rapidly evolving set of applications, it's very important to understand the basics and the challenges involved in generating the paths for autonomous aerial mobility. So with that, I will now go on to give you an overview of how all this is done from a system engineering point of view. So what you see on your screen is a typical architecture where from the map or terrain goes the input, and the path manager then selects certain waypoints, certain points between which the UAV needs to navigate. That information goes to path planning, and path planning generates a trajectory. Now, when path planning generates a trajectory, it has other constraints, inbuilt constraints. For example, the trajectory should be flyable. What does it mean by saying that it should be flyable? I'll talk about that in a while. Now, a flyable trajectory is input to the path following algorithm, which is essentially a guidance algorithm. It steers the heading direction and speed of the vehicle, and that command is then goes to the inner loops, which is the autopilot for attaining the desired command and also maintaining the vehicle stability. So typically your body rates and body attitude are the inner loops, and the path following loop is the outer loop, which is the guidance loop, which governs the heading direction and the speed. And then finally the control surface deflection that goes to UAV, and then UAV flies on that path. You need constant feedback. For example, position and heading is important for closing the path following loop, and the body attitude and body rates are important for the autopilot. So that is the broad overview of how all this is done for a UAV. Now let's define a path planning problem. So a path planning problem can be defined in this way. On your screen you can see that there is an airspace A within which there are certain obstacles, O1 through 6, and there are some waypoints that are given, W1 through 6, and the task here is to generate these paths that you see on your screen, which would then connect W1, W2, W3, W4, and all the way up to W6. So this is the problem that is given to you. So now as sample solution, you can also see the trajectories which connect, say, W1 and W2, and then W2 to W3 with the arrow marks pointed there, which essentially says that when you arrive at the waypoint 2, your heading should be along the direction kite 2. Similarly, the heading is constrained at all the rest of the waypoints. The obvious requirement here is that the UAV paths should avoid the obstacles that you see on your screen, and it should arrive at a given heading. So that these are two constraints that are known to us. But is there more to it? Let us see that. So what is a flyable path? Each of the path segments should have a continuous curvature variation. Now curvature, as you all know, that is rate of change of heading with respect to the forward distance. That directly relates to the turning rate of the vehicle. So when a vehicle turns, a UAV turns, then it is desirable for the tracking commands that there should be a continuous variation in this curvature of the path, so that the corresponding variation in the turning rate for the UAV is also continuous. The other issue is that, of course, the UAV can turn, but you know that these are physical systems and they have limitations. For example, in a fixed wing UAV's case, it banks to turn. That means it uses the roll angle so that a sideward force is generated, which provides centripetal acceleration, and then the UAV makes a turn. So there is a limit to the bank angle, and then subject to aerodynamics, the overall turn rate is limited. That essentially means, for, let's say you are the path planning engineer, so for you this will come as an input that please design this path, for example between W1 and W2, but make sure that its curvature is less than a certain value, its maximum curvature. So that is a fundamental constraint. The third thing here is zero curvature at waypoint. What does that mean? That means that when you come at W2 or W3, the curvature should be zero. The heading rate should be zero. So why is that a requirement? That could be a requirement because when you pass through a particular waypoint, you would like to have a wings level flight. That means you don't want to be in a banked position. For example, this could be for delivery of a parcel. So if you want to drop that, let's say from a fixed wing UAV, then your wings should be level. So that is another constraint, although that is not a hard constraint in the sense of the flight physics, but it is more from the problem. So that is the constraint that can be considered at the waypoint. And of course, the paths should avoid any obstacles in between. So that is an obvious requirement. So the problem is set, and please note that these waypoints W1, W2, W3 and so on are given to you by the path managing part, which is the global path planner. So it is from there you get the waypoints and then you start the path planning part. All right. Now, what I'm going to discuss in this next 15 to 20 minutes is a solution to this problem. Now, please note that there could be many solutions to this problem. People can solve this problem using, for example, optimal control or model predictive control, or a guidance logic, which is let's say dictated by the collision course ideas, and so on and so forth. There are very many ways in which this problem can be solved. What I am going to discuss is a particular solution that we have worked on, and it does offer some very fundamental advantages, and that is the motivation behind presenting this particular solution. But this is just one way of solving this problem, and there are many more. So what we are going to see is something known as 4-parameter logistic curve. Before I get into the equation for the curve, which is a very simple equation, I would just like to give you a little bit of flavor to this, what was going on in our mind when we started working on it. So when Salim had joined the lab, I think around the same time, or perhaps exactly the same time, there was another student, Saurabh Upadhyay. So he was a PhD student who worked with me, and when we started discussing this problem, we were looking for explicit functions, curves which have explicit relationship for y as a function of x. And interestingly, the motivation that Saurabh found was from something known as logistic curve. You might have heard this term in terms of interpolation maybe, or also in population growth models. Maybe in your differential equations part in your undergrad mathematics course, you might have seen these population growth models as nonlinear ODEs and their solutions and all that. And otherwise, the specific uh, curve, which is known as 4-parameter logistic curve, is something that has been used for as an assay tool in medicine and economics and ecology. So mostly in population and particularly in medicine and biology. And then later on, people found this curve to be interesting, and then this variation was used for marketing, economics, and so on. The curve does offer flexibility and control over its shape, so that we will see a little more. So without much ado, I would like to now show this slide to all of you, and in fact I would like all of you to pay a lot of attention here. Now what you see on your screen, the equation y as a function of x, as an explicit function. So y, this is just the name for the ith segment, but that's okay. Y as a function of x. Now what do you see here? It's a very simple equation where y sub I and y sub I plus 1 are constants. So these are just constants here. Y sub I, y sub I plus 1 here. And what does this very simple relationship tell you? So what happens when x is equals to 0? Can somebody tell me what would be y? You can just unmute and tell me. Just look at this equation. And when x equals to 0, what do you get as y?
yi.
Yi, that's correct. So that is yi. And can you also tell me what happens when x tends to infinity? Would someone like to?
0, sir.
Yes, the first term goes to 0, that is correct. But please look at the second term. There is also a
yi plus 1.
correct. So now it is apparent to all of you that this simple equation, explicit equation, y as a function of x, gives you a smooth variation between the given y positions. You can call them asymptotes. So it gives you a smooth variation between these two y positions. And the curve typically looks like what you see on your screen. Now, what else do we see here? What do we see here? As engineers, we of course are interested in design, and for design we always need some handle on an equation, right? As control engineers, you would like to, for example, you use gain in your let's say you design controller using root locus technique, so you have the controller gain, right? By varying that, you can achieve a lot. Similarly here, as engineers, we see that there are these two nice parameters sitting here, b and c, and we assume that these are positive constants. And now the stage is set for us to explore what happens if we vary these parameters, and then hopefully at the end of this exercise we hope to use this explicit 4-parameter logistic curve as a path planning tool for UAVs. All right. Now, so for doing that, let me go to the next slide. Here what I am doing is that I'm just trying to show you how the curve varies. All right. When you vary the parameter b, you can see that as you vary b, the steepness of the curve is what gets primarily affected. Now, I would also like to tell you that this is not a simple mathematical relationship between the slope of the curve and the parameter b. C is always involved, but this is for just to get a feel of what is the prime difference that you see when you vary b. So here, by varying b, we can see that the steepness of the curve changes. Is there a comment? All right. Now let's go to the next part. we would like to see what is the effect of the parameter c. Here we see that by varying the parameter c, the curve essentially shifts forward. For example, c equals to 4, 7, 10 and 12, and you can see that the curve shifts forward. By the way, for the previous thing, I had considered y sub I to be 0. You can see that here yi plus 1 as 5. So you can see all these curves settling at 5. And c was also constant while we were varying b. In the next case, b is constant, that is b is equals to 10. The asymptotes are still the same, and we are going to vary c, which is from 4 to 12. So this is the predominant effect of varying c. So moving on, what are the other quantities of interest? Of course, we would like to know how the heading angle varies along the curve, along this variation, because when the UV traces it, this curve is now going to dictate its heading direction. So how do we get the heading direction from an explicit y equals to fx relationship? As simple as taking the dy by dx. So here you can just differentiate the curve, and what you get here is given on your screen. And I would like all of you to note that for b greater than 0, it can be seen from this equation that since yi plus 1 is greater than yi, your dy by dx is always positive, and hence it is a monotonically increasing function for all b greater than 0. So that is a very important property of the curve, which can also be seen by all these variations. You can see it is monotonically increasing. Moving on, I can take tan inverse of that quantity and get the heading direction. So this is how my heading direction would vary if a UAV is tracing this curve. Now comes the second derivative. And why are we looking at this? Because ultimately we want to get the curvature characteristics of this curve so that we will know whether this curve is suitable for a given UAV with the turn rate limitation. So in that case, I can take the second derivative of y with respect to x, and then use the second derivative as you see on the top of the screen, and also the first derivative which we have seen in the previous slide, and plug that into this standard form of the curvature relationship as expressed using the second and the first derivative of the curve with respect to x. So that is what you see here, and then when you plug all this in, you get this is the form of the curvature. This may look little involved, but at this, what is important here is that this is a closed form solution. Now let's go back a little and look at these curves. So we would like that for a wings level flight through waypoints, the initial and the final curvature should be 0. We'll see some conditions which impose that, which can be used to impose. But there is one very interesting point in between. The curvature starts building up here, 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 and then it changes sign in this segment. So there should be a point where the curvature goes to 0. So that point is of interest to us because between this initial point and that point, this whole thing can be considered as a part of the 4-parameter logistic S-curve, and that part can be used as an independent path planning tool because that also gives you the curvature to be 0 at that point and a heading which can vary, because otherwise you see that your heading typically goes from 0 and it ends on 0. So there is not much of variation happening there. So that is why the point of inflection is also important. That can be readily obtained by equating y double dash to 0. So if you equate these two equations, you can get the x position of the p point of inflection, and how to get the y position? Well, just substitute that into your main equation, which is here. So you can get y for that. So that's how you get the point of inflection. Now let's look at something very fundamental here. We have seen that this curve is, just one second. It varies asymptotically, right? So it's only when x tends to infinity, y reaches yf. Now that is something that not we wanted to. We, as a path planning problem, we would like to go from an initial point to a given final point. But this is not happening. This is only going to that y position as x tends to infinity. So mathematically, it looks like this doesn't work. But all of you, and I believe most of you are control engineers, so you have seen this situation many times. For example, your first order response, right? It never reaches that value. But as engineers, we are absolutely okay because we have come up with ideas of settling time and all that. So beyond that, it doesn't matter to us. A very similar thing can be used here. So at the particular x where you would like the y to be very close to a given yf, you can impose a condition that yi plus 1, which is the y here, minus y at a given x, let us say where my cursor is, that should be less than 2% of the total difference in the y coordinate. And if you use the main equation again back into this and substitute, this is of course yi plus 1 is given, and at at x equals to xi plus 1, you can get yi plus 1. And if you put that in this equation, it gives you this very simple relationship that your xi plus 1, wherever it is, here it is not marked, but this is where it is, it should be greater than a certain value. And you can understand that because the curve gets closer and closer to the y coordinate as you move in this direction. So there is a minimum value beyond which the error is always less than 2%. So that's a very basic thing. So how do we summarize? So we have expressions for heading and curvature. This is called the final point reachability condition. That means if this condition is satisfied, then we can assume that this is a point-to-point planning solution between these 2 points. So what are these conditions that we see? C is of course greater than 0. For initial heading to be 0, B has to be greater than 1. For final heading to be 0, B has to be greater than 0. Initial curvature to be 0, B has to be greater than 2. And for final curvature to be 0, B has to be greater than 0. How did I note all these things down? How you do that is by extending these limits. When this tends to 0, you can evaluate that and then find out. Similarly, for the heading part, when you evaluate this as a limit, you can find those conditions. So this is what we have. So what I would like to tell you at this point is that if you're going to use B greater than 2, C as a positive quantity, and then if your xi plus 1 satisfies this, then you are ready with a path planning tool between the 2 points. But there is one issue that I just hinted at, but I did not really address. That is that this S curve that we are trying to generate will always give you the same heading direction as you left at W1. But that's not what we're looking for, because here you can see, if I go back to the original problem, the heading direction desired at W2 may not be in general equal to the one at W1. So this solution that we have found and we started working with is promising, but it has a limitation. It doesn't offer us that flexibility. So one idea here was to use the point of inflection as a point up to which I can consider one segment of this 4PL curve as an independent path planning solution. So what the idea here is that whatever is the waypoint that you want to reach, design the curve so that your point of inflection coincides with that point, and the heading direction that is desired at Wi plus 1 is equal to the heading direction that you would have at point of inflection. All right. So at point of inflection, if you want to find the heading direction, you have the x POI, and then using the equation of the curve, you can get y POI, and then you can obviously plug that into the this equation. For example, here in terms of x POI, if you substitute, it will directly give you the slope at that point. So that is how all these things are tied up. We take the desired next waypoint and the heading along that desired heading at that point as inputs and design a full 4PL curve in a fashion that its point of inflection coincides with the desired waypoint and the heading direction also matches. But for generating the solution, you need a virtual final point so that you have the equation of the 4PL curve in the form that we have already seen. So this is the idea that is used. Now the kinematic equations are there, and there are some more reading documents that I will share at the end of this part of my presentation. And then you can relate B to the position of that waypoint, this one, and the heading direction there. So that would be your first step. Once you know B, you can, using B, you can calculate. This is using XPOI formula, by the way. So using that, you can get the value of C. And if you know B and C, then again, using the basic equations, you can find out the final value of the virtual final point, which is here. So that is how you can extract another path planning tool out of this approach that we are using. And this is a very simple algorithm. So you input your initial waypoint, the final waypoint, and the heading direction required at the final waypoint. Without loss of generality, we are assuming the heading direction at Wi to be equals to 0, because we can always choose the frame along that direction. Then compute B, finally get C and the virtual yi plus 1, and then generate the full S curve and take only the half S part as your solution. All right. So with that, I would now like to move towards the next part, which is the obstacle avoidance. How to use this curve for obstacle avoidance. Now, the key idea that we are going to use here is based on the monotonic property of the curve. That we have already seen that this curve is monotonically increasing function of x. So I'll not go into the exact proofs for these theorems. These are very straightforward, but this takes a little while. But the constraints we have imposed are like this. At each node here that you see, you impose that the curve is above. So for example, at x1, your function of x1, your 4PL curve should give a y which is greater than y1. So that means you are above this point. And the other additional constraint we have put here is that the slope should be greater than the line joining x1 y1 and x2 y2, which is m1. So that means it's above this and the slope is greater than this segment. Then it is not possible for this curve to pass this line segment. There cannot be an intersection between these two. Similarly, all the way up to the highest point here, and you can get the condition for avoiding the curve from above. Similarly, you can look at conditions for avoiding the curve from below, and the red edges that you are seeing of this convex polygon. So by the way, all the obstacles are considered to be convex polygon. That is where the monotonic property of the curve can be easily used. And then similarly, you can have impose these constraints and get the solution for going from below. Okay, there are some comments here because when we were doing this work, there are existing methods that people have used, and for example, Bezier curve, you might have heard this in your undergraduate maths, most probably as an interpolation curve. Splines are also used extensively for interpolation. So here the main difference is that first of all you need only two parameters, that is B and C, whereas you need 4 each for a typical S curve generation using Bezier and B-spline. And path generation is closed form, but the coefficients, for example, the Bernstein coefficients you require for Bezier curve generation, you'll need 6. And here again some recursive computations are required, but for us it is all very closed form, simple, explicit. Obstacle avoidance is usually iterative. It's fairly complicated because these are parametric curves. See, that is where the challenge is. 4PL is an explicit curve, and that is why it simplifies a lot of this. And that's how you see the advantage. Now, beyond this point, I'm just going to show you some results which are obtained using this method. And the vehicle on which, the model of the vehicle on which this was implemented is the famous Aerosonde vehicle. And before I move on, I'll just show you some autopilots that are used for validation. Please note that this is not really the major focus of the work. These are things that are related to the inner loops. For our discussion today, we are mostly in the path planning. Right now in the path planning part, we'll go to path following very soon. But these details are pertinent only to this segment of this overall system block. But still, for the sake of completeness, let me just very quickly show to you how this happens. So you have a commanded height, and using which you get a commanded pitch angle, and then using the that you can get the finally your elevator deflection for the vehicle. And as an output, you get the pitch angle, the angular rate, and the altitude, which are then fed back. For the forward speed control, you need the throttle as the input, which is coming from the commanded airspeed, and then the actual airspeed is used as a feedback. So this is known as the longitudinal autopilot, which is borrowed from this very famous book on small unmanned aircraft. Similarly, you have the lateral autopilot. For lateral autopilot, of course, as I told you, we are looking at bank to turn. So the course angle is first converted into bank angle, and the bank angle is achieved using your aileron deflection. Then again you measure the roll angle, the rate, and the course angle for closing the loop. So on your screen, what you see is a situation where the UV had to start from this position that you see and had to go to that waypoint, but while avoiding these two convex polygon obstacles. So this is the achieved path and also the followed path. How to follow a given path, that I will discuss in the next segment of this discussion. But this is the solution which abides by the constraints. Now this is a picture that I would like all of you to pay a lot of attention, because this is the drawing board, this is the design, this is where everything is happening. And let us try to see what is going on here. First of all, I am expressing the final point reachability condition in this BC design space. As I had mentioned a little while back, that this is all about the B and C, two parameters. So this is our design space. So we can first express the final point reachability constraint, and now we had those results about how to go above an obstacle and below an obstacle. So for example, if you want to go from O1 from top, so the dashed line gives you that limit, and O2 from below gives you the red line. So in between these two is the feasible region. Here this is O1, by the way, and this is O2. So above O2 and below O1, that is what is this solution coming out to be. And in this region, you can pick any BC pair, and this is what has been chosen here, 7 and 500. And then just use that and you get a feasible path which satisfies the constraint. Now, there are a couple of other very important comments I want to make. The first one is that you can also look at O2 from top. That means, let's say you can just take a steep S curve here and then just avoid both these obstacles from top. That is also possible in this case. And this is where you see that this is the region where you will have that kind of a solution. You can also note that C is significantly smaller in this region, and you can imagine that since C shifts the point of inflection forward and backward, for all these solutions which are going from this direction, this C would be smaller. So that can be seen from this. Now the question that might come to your mind is that, is there a guarantee that given a random arrangement of these obstacles and arbitrary waypoints that the solution would exist? The answer to that question is no. So there is no guarantee that because some of these constraints there may not be an intersection of a feasible region. So that is something that still needs to be kept in mind while you do all this. So it will have to be a case by case basis. where you can look at the problem, go to your design space, everything is in BC space, all these are closed form relations, and you can just directly map them and get your solutions. The beauty of this method also lies in the fact that you could choose multiple BC pairs as solutions. There's nothing sacrosanct about 7500. You could have chosen 10 and 500 as well. Similarly, anything here. So it offers you multiple feasible solutions. Now these are some of the states, the coarse angle, which varies and then finally again approaches zero. The roll angle also, of course, you bank to turn, so the roll angle changes and then again approaches to zero. The height, initially it was not at the desired height, so this is a typical say second or higher order response of the tracking, and then you have the pitch angle, which again you have the you have a good tracking of that as well. Now to I'm sorry about yeah, I'm sorry about the disruption. I um, okay. Can somebody please confirm that my screen is visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. So now towards the end of this, I just want to show you that how to use this tool for some problems which could be of interest to us. All right. So this is the aerial view from Google Earth of ISC's north side of the campus. And here that you see something which actually looks like a UAV. This is by design. This is the new aerospace department. Well, not so new, it's been 10 years. But this is our new building, and this was intentionally created in a way that it resembles some sort of an aircraft. So that's where I sit, and that's where Salim used to sit for all those years. And there's an airstrip here where we do UAV, a lot of UAV flights. And what I am doing here is just creating some convex polygons on this map so that we can have these 4PL solutions as flyable paths between some waypoints. And the waypoints I'm just considering by dropping these pins on this Google Earth map. So from there you can extract all this and put this here. So these are the convex polygons, these are the waypoints. And between W1 and W2, the problem is to fly with the same heading of arrival as that was at W1. So that's how that happens. Between W2 and W3, you would like the UAV to pass through W2 but arrive at a heading which is not really identical to either of the two. So obviously you can see here that a full S-shaped path will not work. So you use two half S-shaped paths to achieve this. Then you have W1, W2, W3, W4. So you have a full S curve here, W1 to W2, and two half S curves between W2, W3, and W3, W4. So now, so how was all this done? I just now talked about the one S-shaped path that was for the first problem. So here you do the same thing again. You take the convex polygon and then do all your mathematics on in BC space. And then from the feasible region, pick one BC pair, any one, and then you have the path. So for this case, B was 5 and C was 340. Similarly, for the next problem, here these two half S-shaped paths were generated using these B and C parameters and so on and so forth. 1S and 2 half S-shaped paths, we have seen that, and 5 half S-shaped paths that we are going to see in this next segment. W1, W2, W3, W4, W5, W1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 segments connecting these 6 points. Again, you have these smooth paths which satisfy the constraint that we have been talking about up to this point. So I am just finishing this part of my lecture, and here what have we seen is that maximum curvature bound, obstacle avoidance, waypoint reachability, all this can be now done in a 2D design parameter space, that is the BC space. It's a computationally feasible approach because all these relations that you use are closed form, and it is a relatively simpler approach because this is all based on analytic closed form results. And we also saw some validation on 6 degree of freedom UV model. These are some publications out of this work. So if you would really like to sort of work all the equations out on your own, this is possible. All these, I don't think it is very challenging. So you can look at these publications, and then, and if you want, you can always email me. I can share them with you, and you can, if you want to know more or read more on this, then you can. This is for further reading. Acknowledgements. Yes, Saurabh is currently at University of Bristol, is a postdoc there, and yeah. So all this is what I have presented was part of his PhD thesis. So thank you very much. I am now moving to the second part of my talk. We can have one or two quick questions now, or maybe at the end when we have some more time. So how would you like to do that, Salim?
Yes, hello sir.
Yes.
I didn't notice what you are saying.
Would you like to take some questions now, or should I go ahead with the second part and we can take questions at the end of this?
It is up to you, sir. If it is fine, you can ask. They can participant can ask questions now because we are arranged in 3 parts.
Okay.
It may be fine if they want. They can interact now.
All right. All right. So I will wait for if there are any comments, or you can always
Participants, please, if you have any queries.
Yes. Okay, if not, then I would like to go for the second part, and then towards the end, I'm hoping that we'll have some time, so you can always ask me at that point also, or any time in between. So the second part that I am going to now discuss is the other problem, that is the path is generated, but how to follow a path, right? So if you look at this block diagram here, so path planning gave you a flyable trajectory, but what should be the path following logic for achieving that? And that is the focus of this part of the talk. So we are looking at a guidance law. What is a guidance law? A guidance law is essentially a steering logic for an aerial robot or a UAV. So it governs typically the heading direction of the vehicle so as to achieve the desired objective. One way to do that is to just have the approximative path by points, by considering points on the path. For example, a full S curve, you can imagine that to be a collection of 10 XY coordinates, and then use some guidance law to go through all these points one by one. But you know that that is not an accurate representation of what we want. Because for a given path, if you discretize it into further waypoints, it doesn't really provide the complete curvature information. The other thing that can come to your mind is that why not use y equals to fx as an explicit relationship and hard code on a UAV so that it can track it. The problem with that kind of open loop approach is that in realistic scenarios, there is dynamics, there are delays. So you may not be able to ideally follow that curve. And then once you're not on the curve, those commands will not work out. And as control engineers, obviously, you understand that concern. So we are looking at, again, an easily implementable and of course an accurate guidance law for general curvature path following. So that's the objective for this part. Now, again, this is a problem which has been looked at from various angles, like nonlinear control methods. Lyapunov theory was used. Optimal control, so minimize the cost while the trajectory follows this. Vector field is more like, at a given position in a plane or 3D, you get your desired heading direction as a function of your position. And if you do that for the entire domain of interest, it appears like all these points have these vectors at each of the positions. So that's the vector field approach. What we are going to look at is something known as virtual target based guidance. And I'll explain to you that by using some simple pictures. So just imagine what you see on your screen. Can I request everyone to please mute their mics? There's some disturbance. All right, thank you so much. Now here you see a UAV and a path. So the idea is that the UAV would like to follow that path. So let's see how the virtual target framework works. Now this idea is coming from a background in missile guidance theory. So that is another area in which our group works. For example, Salim's thesis was on missile guidance. And we were keen to look at this problem from a missile guidance perspective. Of course, there is no missile here, but we just want to use some ideas of guidance theory to see if we can solve this problem. So how to do that? For missile guidance problems, you need a target. So here the whole path is in that sense the target. So it doesn't work like that. So where is that point? So you will have to consider a virtual target on this path. So that virtual target is this red circle here. And you can imagine that if the vehicle or the UAV is trying to intercept this virtual target, in the process of doing so, it is possible that it may also follow the path. So that is the broad philosophy of this idea. Consider a virtual target on the path, let the vehicle use a guidance law, and then take that as a target for interception, and then use a guidance command accordingly, and then see if ultimately we can find out how accurately can it follow the path. So that is the broad idea behind this construction. The other key part here is that the distance between the virtual target and the vehicle, that is an interesting quantity. So the idea is that at the end of the exercise, the UAV is also on the path, the virtual target is also on the path, and they are separated by some constant distance, which is say R star. And since the speeds are equal, it just keeps on following it. It cannot intercept it because the speeds are equal. And virtual target is obviously virtual. It is just a logic in computer. So you can obviously generate that if you have your logic ready. So that is the idea of using a virtual target and then following the virtual target, and in the process following the path. that needs to be tracked. Now this problem also has some background. This was initially introduced, the virtual target based path following idea, in a very famous paper by these people from MIT with Professor Jonathan Howe's group, where they looked at this where they introduced this nonlinear guidance logic. There was some more analysis, and then there was another pure pursuit based idea that was introduced in reference 3, and later on I also worked on this problem while I was doing my postdoctoral research. But what we are looking at today is a new idea which is not really included in these works. And let me now try to move forward and see how we solve this problem. Here we are looking at the virtual target moves at a constant distance r star ahead of the UAV. So how can you impose that this distance between the UAV and the virtual target remains constant? Now UAV speed may vary due to some reasons. So the only way to do that is to have your logic in the computer which can generate its forward speed accordingly. So virtual target speed will have to vary accordingly, because its heading direction is dictated by the path itself, but its speed you will have to adjust so that dr by dt is equals to 0, right? So that would be the cosine component of vt along this line minus the cosine component of va along this line. That will give you r dot. You want to impose that r dot to 0, and then by that reverse calculation you can find out the speed of virtual target. So that is all set. So the problem is set now. The only thing that remains is that what should be the steering logic or the guidance law for the UAV so that all this can be achieved. Now here, interestingly, the idea that I am going to showcase today is perhaps the most simplest guidance logic that can be used for path following. So there is a lot of geometric intuition behind this, but we'll get into that. But what I am going to show here is this. Just imagine that the UAV is trying to follow this path, the dotted line, and then this is the position of virtual target. This is the distance r star that remains constant, and this is the direction of motion of virtual target that is dictated by the path itself. So it has to be the tangent. So this logic says that if that tangent leads the line joining the UAV and the virtual target by a certain angle, then the UAV should take an angle of that line of sight which is equal and opposite. For example, alpha a minus theta is the angle that the UV heading direction makes with the line of sight. Line of sight is given by this theta. This sense is negative because we are going clockwise here. So alpha minus theta is this angle that the UV makes with the line of sight, alpha a minus theta, and alpha t minus theta is the angle that the virtual target makes. So just take an equal and opposite angle of the line of sight, and that's it. That is the idea. There's nothing more than that to the idea. Now, how this idea works, what is the geometric intuition? Is there some analysis we can do to show that it works? All that is coming up. Now, the proposed guidance law is as simple as that. Theta minus alpha a is alpha t minus theta, which leads to this relationship. I can get the desired heading for the UAV just based on the line of sight angle and also the heading direction of the virtual target, and using which I can now consider this alpha a coming from this as the guidance logic, and this could be the desired value of alpha d, which can then be tracked, for example, say using a proportional controller. But note that the desired heading for the UAV is a function of the line of sight angle and the virtual target heading. There is no actual target here, it's all a computation. So how does this work? Let's look at this situation here. By the way, between 2 points, how many circles can you draw? Would anyone like to comment on that quickly? So how many circles can you draw passing through 2 points?
One, sir.
One. How about another one? It's not possible, of a higher radius. Of a slightly higher radius, yes, it is possible. There are infinite such circles you can draw connecting 2 points. This is a very basic thing from your, most probably from your middle school you would recall. But if the tangent is given at one point, then it is a uniquely determined circle. So what we are looking at is, consider a circle which connects the UV position and the virtual target position, and also that the tangent at virtual target is actually the direction of the path, right? So now there is a unique circle which connects A, T, and it's the tangent at T. So that circle is drawn. Now look, if you look at it carefully, what this logic says is that you take that, again, that sigma angle that this VT has with respect to the line joining the two. So this is the angle that the tangent makes with the chord, right? And that is equal here. So by following an equal and opposite lead angle, the UV actually follows the tangential direction to the circle, which passes through the instantaneous UV and target position and has target heading as tangent. So what is happening here is that this logic just makes sure that UV follows a heading direction which corresponds to a tangent to that circle, which is uniquely determined by AT and the direction alpha t. So that is the, so that's how the UV, that's what it does. All right. Now, before we go on, we can do some linear analysis here. This is very short and sweet analysis, and I'm sure all of you are going to enjoy this. So, let us say the UV is trying to follow a straight line path. Okay. If it is trying to follow a straight line path, can we do some analysis to show that this idea works? Now here what I am doing is, you assume that all these angles are small, because ultimately the kinematics is nonlinear, so we can't really use our simple linear tools. So assume that these angles theta, sigma, alpha, they are small quantities. So in this figure you can see d dot is nothing but VA times sine of alpha A. Alpha is the heading direction of the UV, which is also equal to the desired heading. You can assume that it is following the guidance law perfectly. And that angle, if you see here, this is a horizontal line. So this angle sigma here is equal to this angle, which is already given as theta. So this would be alpha minus theta. So alpha and that angle, since it is equal, this would ultimately give you 2 theta. If you look at alpha d here, right? So this is 2 theta minus alpha t, since, so that is what, alpha t is 0. You can see here that the target is moving along the x-axis. So using that equation, you get alpha d as 2 theta. That is what you see here. So if sine of that angle, if that angle is small, theta is small, so you get 2VA into theta. Now in this triangle between AT, and if I drop the perpendicular, theta is the angle, sigma is equals to theta. You can see this angle and this angle. So your tan sigma is equals to sigma for small angles, which is equals to d. For sine sigma, so d divided by r star. And since theta is measured in this direction, it's a negative quantity. So you just have 2 VA, and theta can be approximated by sine theta. So that would be d by r star with a negative sign. And that is how you finally get d dot as a function of d itself. What kind of dynamics is that? This is a simple first order dynamics. And yeah, there is a typo here. There should be a slash here, r star by 2VA. And then you have d dot equals to minus 2VA by r. This is just the first order dynamics with the time constant r star divided by 2a. So you can see that eventually this error will go to 0 and this UV will follow the path. How does that work with the circular analogy? When the UV slides down here, you can see that this angle here, sigma, that alpha t makes with theta, that becomes smaller and smaller. If that angle becomes smaller and smaller, the radius of this circle will keep on increasing, because this circle will become flatter and flatter, and ultimately it will become a straight line, and that is what happens here, and the UV essentially slides down along this path. This is something like, you let us say on a wall on the side you put a stick like this and assume that the surfaces are frictionless, then this stick will slide down, this end will drop along with this, and this end will move forward, r star is constant. So something very similar happens here, and that's how the UV follows the path. There is also a similar analysis for circular path. I'll not get into the details here, but using a similar thing, it can be shown with certain approximations that you get again a similar first order dynamics for a circular path. Now let me show you the some simulation results. Here I would like to show that in comparison to existing methods, there are certain other methods as I was talking about. The settling time for this dynamics is actually the fastest. The other very interesting thing is that since it is a first order dynamics, it doesn't have an overshoot. So this is a very, very sophisticated solution to the problem, although it is also the simplest in the context of these existing methods that we are focusing on. So it is a simple solution, first order dynamics, which avoids overshoot, and a guidance law that is based only on two angles. What are those two angles? Line of sight angle, theta, and the direction of the virtual target. So these are some simulations here. This plot may not be very clear, but the UAV is initially at 50 root 2 distance from this a straight line path, and the virtual target is considered here, and then it just follows the path using the guidance logic. But the next slide is more clear. You can see there are three curves. Just focus on the blue one, that is the actual path, that is the one that corresponds to the proposed guidance law. So position error, this is the cross track error D, it goes to 0 in a first order dynamics fashion. The other two existing solutions are second order, and you can see there is no overshoot and a faster settling. The acceleration required also is lower, so this is a very, very promising result that you see here. Now I am showing you some results for circular path following. Here the R star, please note that R star is a design parameter because you are constructing a virtual target. So that is essentially considered as 100 meters. So you can see the blue curve is tangential guidance, and the green one is nonlinear guidance. The black one is also doing fine here, it is trajectory shaping. The errors are like this, where blue one is slightly better. Lateral acceleration also here, you have, this is the variation you have. Now let's look at some cases where your R star is very high. Now the problem is that if your R star is very high and somehow the UV enters the circle, then it is not possible to find a path on the circle which is at that very high distance. So RC is the radius of the circle. So if you are getting close to the diameter, some of these methods will start failing because the UV has entered the circle. But the tangential logic which we have studied, that doesn't really matter here, because it is first order dynamics, there is no overshoot, it never enters the circle. So it gives you more design flexibility where you can achieve this kind of paths even from outside. So as high as 2 RC, of course beyond that is not possible to find 2 points on a circle which are more than that distance apart. So what do we see? We see a new guidance law which is based on virtual target based guidance law, it is this just the equal and opposite lead angle that you follow. Linear analysis shows faster convergence, no overshoot, and easy to implement. Just two angles. Simulations are carried out. A straight line. And several cases, the advantages. This work was done with Shantanu, who was in our lab, and later on went to University of Southern California for a PhD. And this work was also presented in the AIAA Guidance Navigation and Control Conference. So you can, if you want to know more, you can get some information from here. Thank you. So this is over. I wanted to quickly show you a glimpse of something which is more interesting, perhaps, and it breaks certain boundaries. So this is, again, I would like to now shift our attention from, in general, a trajectory planning problem and how it relates to autonomy. So I'll try to do this quickly because we have only 20 minutes. So let's see if I can finish this one and then we can take questions. So all of you know that autonomous systems are coming in a big way because of advances in artificial intelligence, control systems, computing, big data, learning, and all that. So this is very well a rapidly growing scenario, and with all these technologies coming up at such a rapid speed, so we are really in a very interesting time right now. And this was a comment made by DARPA director. This was some time back, but I think now the feeling is even more stronger. All right. So autonomous systems, what is the basic classification? You have the remote control vehicles, you have teleoperation where a human operator can see and then guide a vehicle, semi-autonomous where at some maneuvers the UAV can do on its own, but fully autonomous is when it can do everything without human intervention. So greater autonomy, the parameters would be lower communication bandwidth, so you have a secure, reliable communication. Sensory requirements, if they are low, it helps because then it directly reduces the payload. The vehicle should be able to support wide range of complex missions, and flexibility is also important. Now, why am I showing you all this? That will be apparent in just a few minutes. But I would like you all to pay attention to this, that how a choice of control law plays such a big role in autonomous operations. Assume that you are the designer and you design a control law which has a simpler structure. That means the computational requirement is low and interoperability is high. That means from one platform to another UAV platform, if you want to move your control law, it's very easy because it is a simple structure. If somehow you think you can design a control law which gives you a variety of closed loop dynamic response, that means you can potentially address a lot of missions. The UAV can. And if there are very few states for feedback required for this particular control method, then the sensory requirements are also low. So the control law is very clearly sitting at the heart of this situation, and it's a very, very important choice. Moving on, I would just like to give you a little bit of a mathematical flavor to a guidance law, a trajectory planning guidance law that I'm going to show it to you. And before that, I would like all of you to work this out with me. It's a very, very simple math exercise, but again, a very interesting one. This equation you might have seen. What kind of equation is this? This is an ODE. Is this a linear ODE or non-linear ODE? Non-linear. So R is of course a real constant or a parameter. So x dot equals to Rx minus x cube. So how do you find the fixed points of a differential equation, nonlinear ODE? You equate the derivative to 0. Now it is very interesting to note here that when R is positive, when R is negative, there is only one fixed point, that is x1 star equals to 0. But if r is positive, and you can do that, you can do all this quickly on a piece of paper. You can take x common, r minus x square. That will give you real values only when r is positive. If r is negative, of course, you don't get real value. But if r is greater than 0, you get two roots as fixed points, that is square root of r and square root of minus r. So what is happening here? Can you quickly find out the stability at these fixed points? That is very easy. You take df by dx, where f is certain, f is x dot. So that would be r minus 3x square. So now when r was less than 0, there was only one fixed point, and if you take df by dx at that point, it gives you a stable fixed point. Now let's look at this situation when you are when r is greater than 0. When r is greater than 0, then at f dash x at x equals to 0 would be r, and that means the x equals to 0 point has become unstable. And the other 2 points, you can see that would be, you'll have to put x equals to root r, and then you'll find out that those 2 points are stable. So because that would be r minus 2r, minus 3r. All right. So why am I doing all this? You can just first see that when r is less than 0, this is how the vector field looks. X and x dot. This is the stable fixed point. All the initial conditions, they converge here. But when r is greater than 0, something very interesting happens. There are two new fixed points that are created, and also the stability of the existing fixed point is changed. That now becomes unstable. This is what is known as bifurcation in nonlinear dynamics. So when you see, this is the diagram where r, when it is negative, there is only one stable fixed point, x equals to 0. But as r becomes positive, this one becomes dash, that means it's unstable. But you get two new ones, which is your root of r plus and minus. And this picture here in r and x star space, it looks like a pitchfork. So that is why this particular kind of bifurcation is known as pitchfork bifurcation. And there are other variations of it. So what is bifurcation? Change in the qualitative or topological system type of a system as its parameters pass through a critical value. Just by changing r, we have got something very interesting here. The closed loop dynamics now has a lot of variations. There are new fixed points, stabilities change, and so on. So there are different kinds of bifurcation. For example, in 1D, there is saddle node bifurcation. Here you can see that fixed points depend on alpha. In this case, fixed points can exchange stability with alpha because you have to take dou f by dou x, and here alpha would play a greater role. Pitchfork bifurcation, we have already seen that fixed points appear and disappear as symmetrical pair. That is what is happening here. Now, why are we doing all this? Let's look at this situation where a UAV wants to do a surveillance around a target. It would typically require range and bearing angle of the target, and then it can do that. The next one could be that it wants to just settle on a circle around it. So it typically requires the distance and its derivative to do that. And if it just wants to intercept the target or just go prosecute it, typically it needs the line of sight rate. But our motivation is that, can we do all this using one controller? And that is where this idea is, that how about this situation where a target position is given and this angle alpha sigma is again the same angle, alpha minus theta. What if we impose from our side a pitchfork bifurcation in the sigma dynamics? So sigma dot now becomes gamma sigma minus sigma q. And we have already done the maths. If the gamma is greater than 0, these two will be two stable fixed points, root gamma minus gamma. Gamma is less than 0, then sigma equals to 0 is the only stable point. And this is how the your trajectories will look. Sigma will go to 0 for all initial conditions when gamma is less than 0. If it is not, then it becomes interesting because you settle at plus or minus 1 depending on where your initial condition is. If you're at 0, you remain at 0, but since it is unstable, a small perturbation, and then you go to either plus 1 or minus 1. And this part that I'm talking about is from a recent work that one of the students did on target tracking trajectories. So now look angle is the angle that the UAV makes with the line of sight. Now you can see very clearly that when gamma is less than 0, sigma ultimately becomes 0. What does that mean? If sigma becomes 0, that means the UAV velocity vector is pointing exactly along the target. That means it is going to prosecute or intercept the target. That is what you see here, target prosecution. If it is an angle, sigma e, the final one, is less than pi by 2, that means the UAV is now going to spiral around the target and ultimately come closer because the angle is less than pi by 2. If it is exactly pi by 2, if I chose gamma as pi square by 4, then root gamma is pi by 2, then I'll get circumnavigation. That is the other problem that I was looking at. It will settle at a fixed circle. And if by any chance I choose gamma greater than pi square by 4 and within 4 pi square, I get a outward spiral. So all this is now possible, and I don't need to change my guidance law. My guidance law still remains the same. There is a little bit of more analysis. This equation itself can be solved by a change of variable and seeing at its resemblance to some standard equation. You can solve for sigma of t when gamma is not equals to 0, or if it is equals to 0. And finally, you can also relate at what radius you will settle if you use gamma equals to pi square by 4, because you would like to know the standoff distance at which the UAV finally settles. And using some analysis, which is again there in the paper, you can see, using psi functions, you can come at, you can evaluate the distance at which the UAV will settle. All right. And I would just like to show you this figure here, because this is my motivation, that now this is a mission on which you wanted to do a set of things. You wanted an inward surveillance trajectory around the target. You also wanted a circumnavigation part, and finally wanted to prosecute the target. So if you look at these problems, these are typically independent problems solved using guidance laws or control laws, independently developed. We are looking at a one-shot solution using bifurcation so that we can achieve all this just by changing the parameter gamma. So initially, gamma is 2. That corresponds to inward spiral. Then it is chosen to be pi square by 4, so that it gives you that root gamma is pi by 2. You go around the target in a circle. Finally, minus 3, so that you can prosecute the target. And the desired radius around this is 70 meters, and initial distance is 150 meters. And here, this is how R varies. R starts from 150, and then you start at 70, but the gamma here, although this is an abrupt change from 2 to pi square by 4, but in these results, what we have used is a smooth variation in gamma using a logistic curve. In fact, the same logistic curve that Saurav worked on in this work is just used for interpolation, because we don't want a abrupt change in gamma from 2 to pi square by 4. So that is how you see that at 70, if you switch to that gamma, the actual value is 69.5, but you settle at 68 because gamma varies smoothly. Then with minus 3, you eventually intercept the target. So in this part, what I want to emphasize, because there is so much about autonomous systems and autonomous vehicles, and the role that artificial intelligence and learning and all these very, very important areas contribute. Control engineers should not forget that they still have a very, very important role in all this. So that is my message to all of you. So control design has a vital role in enhancing autonomy. So flight dynamics and control engineers are very much in to this pursuit of higher levels of autonomy. Mathematically, bifurcation can introduce new fixed points and alternate nature of stability around them. This leads to a variety of qualitative closed loop system dynamics, not systems. And that gives us all these very interesting things. There are other problems that we worked on where bifurcation was used, but that was, I have taken only one example here, that is of target tracking primitives for unmanned aerial vehicles. And bifurcation based design again has a simple structure, your sigma, gamma sigma minus sigma q, and then all these analytic properties, and you need just one state for feedback, that is the line of sight angle, and if you know UV heading, you can compute sigma. So all that is very easy. So it is a step towards that kind of a solution. So that's the my message to all of you. All right, and with that, so acknowledgement, Anjali. So she was a PhD student who I think last year, okay, 21, so 19. She joined Army Research Labs.
Sir, she is an alumni of this institute also.
Oh.
From here. Oh.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Sorry, I should not have missed that.
Okay.
Wow. So I think, yeah, ISC is very proud of the work she has done here, and I'm sure Government Engineering College Thrissur should also be very proud of that. After an excellent stint here at ISC, she is right now at Army Research Labs in the United States doing her postdoc. So this part of work was presented by, this was done by Anjali. So that's all I have. I know I have almost taken the full time, but we still have some time for quick questions. And I will, yes, you can please go ahead. And all these things that I have talked about, the references are there in the talk. And in case you need it, just write an email to me. My email, let me see if I can type it out, is right here. So I can send you these papers. You can also find them online. And yeah, so if there are any comments or questions, please feel free to ask me.
Dear participants, you are free to ask any questions, any queries. Okay, sir, it was very wonderful and very effective and very useful. Nice presentation from you. Now I request Abida for the concluding remarks.
Thank you, sir. Actually, it's my privilege to give the sincere concluding remarks for Ashwini Rao, sir. Actually, Salim sir is my guide, and it is my privilege to say the conclusion remarks to his guide, Ashwini Rao. Let's conclude. Today, he explained about the path planning, path following of the UAV, and also a little bit for the autopilot section. In the path planning section, the trajectory have been planned to how it have been avoided the obstacles, and for parameter logistic curves, how designed for the path planning path as S-shaped curve, and as well as half S-shaped curves can be used for the trajectory planning, how it is implementing very effectively. He explained that one. And next section, he explained about how the guidance law have been developed for the path following. Actually, this guidance method he adopted is the we can give the virtual target based method. In the virtual target, the target is moving. Actually, it is not be reality the target will be there, but a virtual target is creating, and the difference between the range, that is the UAV, and the virtual target is computing, and it is moving and following the path. finally reach the destination. And also the last section, he explained about how the autonomy can be achieved, and by verification method they adopted. Sir, very interesting section, very much in the he explained about all these things in the 1.5 hours. It is very limiting time for explaining all these sections. Thanks a lot, sir. On the behalf of the Government Engineering College and the EEE department and myself, and also with my guide, I express my sincere gratitude towards you. Thank you, sir. Thank you a lot.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was indeed my great pleasure to give this talk, and I look forward to further interaction. If someone wants, I'll be happy to interact with them. Thank you once again to the organizers for giving me this opportunity.
Once again, thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Salim. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Okay. Dear participants, we will again meet at 2 p.m. We will have 15 minutes feedback session, and after that, we will be having an online examination. Okay, thank you.